Ginger, do we know anyone from the working group who definitely could not make it to tonight's meeting?
No one emailed saying they weren't going to make it.
Okay. So right now I see 21 panelists and 7 attendees. So I think we're missing a few working group members.
I'm sure we could just go, there's getting through them for passing the minutes. So I don't.
Sure. All right, so should we get started? All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third working group meeting on renaming Lee Highway meeting. So thanks for joining us. Going over the agenda fairly quickly. So I'm going to give you a quick welcome and adopt the meeting minutes from the September 30th meeting. Then Sandy's going to talk about facts and hopes for the process. Then we're going to summarize the branding and get a summary of the branding and institutional advisory group meetings that were held in the last few weeks. Then we'll review the subcommittees meeting and work. So about 14 of us, well, 12 of us met this past Saturday reviewing the names against the criteria. We'll review our work in the list, the name list we came up with. Then we'll take a survey on the top 10 names, and we'll discuss the remaining names for further discussion and second survey if needed. And the goal of that is to narrow down the list of names to 20 that we can then begin the public polling process after this meeting. We'll discuss next steps and adjourn. So next slide. All right, so again, welcome everyone. Looking forward to having a very productive meeting with you tonight. This is the third of at least 4 working group meetings, planned meetings. And the first thing I would like to do is adopt the meeting minutes from the September 30th meeting. Ginger sent a revised minutes to you all about an hour or 2 ago with a very small tweak, simply just substituting her name or Maya's name for where we referenced LHA. So that's simply all we did. So I don't know if we have any questions or comments on the minutes. And if we don't, I would like a motion to adopt them.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second. All right, so I'll just ask for everyone to say yay, nay, and not do a vote over the chat because I think it should be pretty quick. So all those in favor of adopting the September 30th meeting minutes, say aye.
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 All right, looks like we have at least a majority there. All right, moving on. Just want to remind you, we are continuing to make this a very transparent process. We are posting all of the meeting minutes and all the meeting agenda, all the meeting materials on the LHA website. We're sending you a revised list of names every Friday. Obviously, that's done now because today was the deadline to accept names. But everything that we're discussing with you is getting posted online, and we encourage you and your neighbors to take a look at everything we're doing. And obviously, this meeting is being recorded on Facebook right now and be posted on the website as well. So continue to do this in a very transparent way as we move through the process. Next slide. So just a quick recap of what we did at the September 30th meeting. We agreed upon the rules and the criteria we will use to evaluate the names. We went through the documentation we provided you between the September 16th meeting, September 30th meeting, like the list of names, the charge, message points, and all of these can be found on the LHA website. We started a student survey, And these were several middle schools along the highway corridor. And so far, 123 middle school students have filled out the survey. So it's been a wonderful reception so far, and we've received some good suggestions from them as well. And then just a reminder, we're going to have public polling for the 20 final names between October 23rd and November 30th. And the real goal and takeaway from today's meeting is to get the list of names down to the final 20. All right, next slide. So Sandy, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, hi everyone. The steering committee wanted me to say a few words, so these will be just a few words. You all know that this is no ordinary time. The opportunity to rename Lee Highway is historic, and it's a serious responsibility. Like Plan Lee Highway, it's a once-in-a-lifetime moment to learn from our past and create a better future. So I wanted to just share with you a hope for successful placemaking and branding. And then I want to share a fact and a concern with you. So first of all, the hope. Although I was not on the subcommittee, I understand there were questions on Saturday about placemaking and branding and how it relates to the renaming. This is the multi-dimensional aspect of our work reflected in LHA's guiding principles. We are definitely looking to our past and the importance of our history and cultural heritage, which is such an important part of placemaking. But we are also looking to the future and how the name can brand the type of physical form and other aspects that we aspire to under Plan Lee Highway. It is imperative that as we rename Lee Highway, we remember that there are 14 well-established communities along the corridor. The new name should reflect their needs and link them together as our main street, a place with a shared identity. Plan Lee Highway will replan 5 activity nodes, newly defined by high-quality mixed use and thoughtfully designed systems that recognize the importance of climate change, carbon emissions, renewable energy, beautiful architecture, inviting streetscapes with public areas, and walkable, safe, shaded streets. Placemaking drives economic value and job creation. Neighborhoods and major thoroughfares with positive, welcoming identity not only provide better living environments and experiences for residents, but are also financially more successful for property owners and investors. If Plan Lee Highway succeeds, we will have built a welcoming and equitable Main Street of which we are proud, and it will be branded eventually with the new name of the corridor. So the second thing I just want to quickly mention is a fact and a little bit of a concern. As you know, the renaming of Lee Highway is an LHA process, but it's definitely in collaboration with the county. As was true with the transformation of Jeff Davis Highway into Richmond Highway, we need the county to approach either the Commonwealth Transportation Board or the General Assembly to actually change both Lee and Highway. To make this process easier, the county has requested, as you know, that the names we submit be appropriate for multiple regional jurisdictions so that they might be more acceptable to the CTB. However, when I drove to UVA on Monday, down Lee Highway, I discovered that the name Lee Highway is found only in Arlington and Fairfax County. As you travel further south, it is always referred to as either Route 29 or the 29th Infantry Memorial Highway or the Seminole Trail. Even if Falls Church agrees to change what they have already changed, Lee Highway to Washington Street, to whatever we suggest, I doubt very much that Fairfax City will change their new name of Fairfax Boulevard because they recently hung all new and expensive looking signs. Plus, Fairfax Boulevard was chosen because it is reflective of placemaking in Fairfax City, and it could be equally reflective of placemaking in Fairfax County. But it is not part of Falls Church's or Arlington's identity or placemaking. Assuming Fairfax County gets rid of Lee Highway and chooses Fairfax Boulevard, meeting the request for a name that fits all four jurisdictions will become increasingly difficult. So just to conclude, next you will hear from 2 of our dedicated advisory groups. Then you will hear from the subcommittee, incredibly hardworking people who spent a gorgeous fall Saturday using rules and criteria to choose authentic names that reflect our local history, our values, and our future aspirations. Thank you for voting tonight to continue the process. Arlington will be better off because of your commitment, courage, and leadership to reckon with our past and build towards our future.
All right, thank you, Sandy, so much for that. Moving on to the next slide. All right, so I will hand it over to Desiree Stoller, who is a member of the Branding Advisory Group, to give us a summary of the meeting we had with the group a couple weeks ago and what you all thought and what you're thinking we should do for picking a name.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And Sandy, thank you so much for both the facts and the hopes there. Everyone, grateful to be here with you tonight. My name is Desiree Stoller. I'm a resident of Roslyn. I am a parent to 2 young toddlers, and I am a branding and nonprofit executive in the area. Very, very honored to be a part of the Branding Advisory Group. When we met a couple of weeks ago, there were a few thematic guiding principles that really came to light. And so I'm just going to emphasize them here. And I also will stay for the totality of the meeting as best possible to both weigh in and to underscore some of the themes that came through in our group. First and foremost, I think what was important to all of us was that a name that was selected for the top 20, that one, it highlighted or better informed the history of Arlington or Virginia. There's a great deal of pride here, and people wanted to make sure that that was elevated with this name, given its prominence and how many people go through this corridor every day. And also to the point that Sandy just made in terms of really sort of grounding this placemaking and the beauty of the Arlington County. We all did see value in having a name that was approachable, inclusive, and frankly just created a sense of community by being easier and accessible to those who both are longtime Arlingtonians as well as those who are just arriving to the area because of new employers and because of just how wonderful we all think Arlington is. I think this is something that we spent a lot of time on, this third point, in terms of making sure that there was a story to tell. There are people and names that really lend themselves well to giving the county a chance to merge both the history of the story and where Arlington is going, bridging the complex and rich history that we have with how we want to position ourselves for both community members as well as those who are looking to us as this beacon of what a great county can be. And so many of the names that ended up being our favorite gave us a chance to tell that story. And I'll leave this note because this was important to a few of the committee members, but knowing that there are some names that are readily accessible and no one would blink an eye at saying, and others that may create a pause and prompt people to want to lean in and have to really think about how to say it. And all we'll say is that that's part of the joy sometimes, learning names, and that is, probably representative of the diversity of this country and to Arlington. And so if there are a couple of finalists that are a little bit less difficult to know or understand right at the outset, let's lean into how we can make that accessible to the county as a whole. So we do have about 18 names that resonated with the full group. I'm happy to speak to any of them in terms of why they're on the list and or to talk about a couple of the favorites. But other than that, I'm here to support in an advisory capacity for the remainder of the session. And I'm grateful to Sandy and Matthew for giving me this chance.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Desiree. It was a really good summary, and it was a very productive meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago. And just to give everyone a heads up, after we get an update from Maura from the Institutional Advisory Group, we'll pause for questions, and you all can ask Desiree and Maura additional questions about what their respective groups thought and suggested. So with that, I'll move on to the next slide. All right, so I'll hand it off now to Maura Cycli, who was a representative from the Institutional Advisory Group. So Maura, you want to give us a summary of the meeting we had a week or two ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you all for having us. And my husband and I were asked to be a part of the institutional advisory group. I myself am also a public relations and branding professional. My husband is a lifetime Arlington resident. So we've kind of merged those two together. We met to discuss the renaming process. Various civic associations, representatives, school principals, community groups, and clergy were present. We reviewed the criteria for renaming. We discussed next steps for community outreach, and we provided feedback on the names submitted thus far. Gordon Mantler, who's a parishioner at St. Mary's Church, volunteered to get the committee in touch with other nearby places of worship. Gordon also plans to act as a go-between for the organization and Father Andrew to ensure information reaches its intended audience. Key deadlines and project information may be included in future church publications like the monthly newsletter, the weekly email, or the Sunday service pamphlet. Whitney Kernodle, co-founder of Black Parents of Arlington and co-founder of Arlington for Justice, will share our information with her organization's members as well as with other community groups that she's a part of. Whitney also plans to have a Lee Highway Alliance representative on an upcoming episode of her highly attended weekly Facebook Live chat called Let's Talk Tuesday with Whitney and Yolande. Renee Harbor, who's the principal at Swanson Middle School, and Ellen Smith, principal at Dorothy Ham Middle School, discussed how they're intertwining our efforts with their civics classes and are encouraging student participation. Our key takeaways were quite similar to the branding groups. We found value in having names that fell into a variety of categories. So Arlington history and state history and culture and flora. We think this would, it would be good to suggest when options are cut down to 20 or so, that efforts are made to provide members of the community multiple options from various categories as well. It was also mentioned that names relevant to Arlington and to place, like flora, culture, and landscape, may have a better chance of withstanding the test of time. Multiple group members were drawn to local historical name options, but it was suggested that names not already represented in Arlington, including buildings, parks, schools, be considered of higher importance. Finally, multiple group members also preferred using the first and last name of historical figures instead of just shortening it to a last name. This suggestion was aimed at promoting intrigue and hopefully further research. I hope that was a good summary, and like Matthew said, he'll give a little more information and then we're happy to take any questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Maura. It was an excellent summary. And again, like the branding group, we had a really good meeting with you all a week or two ago. All right, so next slide. All right, so real quick before we open up to questions, just a reminder, and Sandy already referenced this, we have been talking informally to members of the CTB and the Arlington County Board about the process because, as you all know, the work for renaming Lee Highway does not simply end whenever we submit our recommendations. Either the CTB or the General Assembly will have to change the road name, and the guidance we received, particularly from the CTB and also from the Arlington County Board, is we should strive to come up with some names, name recommendations that could be applied regionally as best they can, and recognizing that there's a strong interest in local names and all that. But the CTB, there are only 2 members from Northern Virginia, and everyone else is from the rest downstate. So that's something that we'll have to worry about on the back end of this process, but it is important guidance that we receive from both the CTB and the county board. And that's just something for you all to consider and think about as we proceed through this meeting and select the final 20 names. So I think with that, we'll open up to questions. Yep. And just a reminder, raise your hand. I can only see 3 people at a time because we're sharing a screen, but Maya will call on you if you're raising your hand.
Jim Todd, you're the first hand I see up. I think you are still muted, Jim.
Better be muted than not when, at least when we start. Sorry about that. I had a couple of, I think the best word, unfortunately, is concerns for 2 of the favorite names that I wanted to raise so that there could be some further discussion. And those are concerns with the name heritage and progress. For me, those are both loaded terms. Heritage, to me, is too tied to the lost cause mythology of the Confederacy. And progress is too tied for me to the Southern boosterism of the mid 20th century, which often, which was sort of a pro-business attitude, which often came at the expense of historically African-American business communities, and is well documented. I was actually able to dig it out when I first saw the term in Edward Ayers, who's a UVA history professor's Promise of the New South book. So I would like to just have some discussion, but recommend that we drop those names. And I'll just leave it with saying everything else you guys did at that meeting on Saturday, Sorry to Make It, is wonderful. And I love the chart you put together, and I think you did an amazing job.
Well, thanks, Jim. That's really good feedback. And I just want to mention to other members, after we move past these questions and comments, which are really geared to the branding groups, if you have questions about their thoughts, we will discuss what the subcommittee worked on this past weekend and the name suggestions. And that'll be a great time to talk about your concerns or thoughts with the subcommittee's work. So Maya, anyone else have any questions?
Not seeing anybody.
All right. So last chance. All right, we'll move on. All right, so this is the portion of the meeting we're going to dive in and review the subcommittee's work and the names we came up with for the when we called the list from 186 to 38. So just a reminder, we met this past Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. There were 12 members of the working group who participated, and anyone in the working group could have participated if they wanted to, but you're recognizing we're all busy people with full schedules. Not everyone can make it, but we did have a strong representation of 12 working group members who came to the subcommittee meeting. We went through 186 names, discussed the rules, and applied the criteria and called the list. We sent you the criteria report, I think either yesterday or the day before, and we'll review that in a moment. Just a few points of clarification of how we interpreted some of the criteria. We interpreted the racial equity criteria to mean, does the name further increase awareness? And the example we have here is Martin Luther King versus Doc Muse. And what we're really getting at here is, Martin Luther King obviously did tremendous things promoting and furthering racial equity, but everyone knows who Martin Luther King is. And we see this criteria as an opportunity for a name to further increase awareness for racial equity, and that will probably come from a person or a concept that's not as well known as someone like Martin Luther King. We thought that the era should be considered. So, do we want to honor individuals coming from the Civil War or Jim Crow eras, regardless of, what that person did during those eras? I think we strongly claim on the side of not having a name from those eras just because of what those eras represented. We prefer to remove names already honored in the county with the exception of John M. Langston due to his statewide relevance. The subcommittee liked the idea of recognizing locally highway history. We recognize there must also be names relevant to all of Arlington and Northern Virginia on the list. And this goes back to the Commonwealth Transportation Board process, or the General Assembly process we'll have to go through once our work is done. We ended up with 39 names and that were approved and remain on the list. 5 names that we want to discuss further with you because we weren't sure whether to include them or not include them. And 142 names are removed from the list. All right, next slide. So we want to get your thoughts on a few names and really get your input on whether these names should be on the list or not for your vote tonight. So, one issue came up that we didn't necessarily think of on the front end is a full name similar to an existing street? So Alfred Clark versus Clark Street. So obviously there's already a Clark Street. So if we chose Alfred Clark and renamed Lee Highway Clark Boulevard, That is obviously the same name as Clark Street and wouldn't work because of Arlington's rules about having names. Names can't be the same name as another street. But there's an open question whether Alfred Clark Boulevard would work. So some other examples we had that came up like that was Charles P. Monroe. There's obviously Monroe Street. And I think those were the only two, Alfred Clark and Charles P. Monroe. So we want to get your thoughts on whether someone who, if you use their full name, might conceivably not violate the having the same street name as another street rule. And the second one is, should we use a name of a person who has not been deceased for 5 years or is still alive? So those particular names were Frank Wilson and Joan Mulholland, and then James Parks and Oliver Hill have similar names to existing streets. So with that, I think we want to open it up to the working group and get your thoughts on whether we should include those names or not. So again, I can't see all of you, so raise your hand and Maya will call on you.
I think Jim has his hand up, doesn't he?
I think you should clarify whether you mean raise your hand in the app or raise your hand on their picture.
Sorry, in your picture, because Maya can see all of you.
Raise your actual hand, like in school.
So Jim has his hand up, Matt.
All right, Jim.
Thank you. Sorry to be the person dominating the question ceremony. I hope there'll be many other questions tonight. I just wanted to start with the suggestion that we do include Joan Mulholland, even though she's still living. I think that the sort of the rule that people have to have passed away to be eligible can be problematic, since some of the people that that are most that Arlington, I think, will come to value most are people that are still living. And I think that looking backwards may bias the selection towards men and may bias it towards white men sometimes even. And yet I think what happened in Arlington in the 1950s and 60s, and the people from Arlington that were part of that, I think is something that we should see if there's a way to recognize their contributions, even though they're still alive. And so I think that that same comment would go towards everybody else that's either recently deceased. So I think that we should push back against the notion that someone has to have been deceased or long deceased.
Mike Cantwell.
I'd like to thank the subcommittee for their work on Saturday. I heard it took 4.5 hours, so I really appreciate everything you did. I would like to encourage the working group not to name Lee Highway after a person. Several reasons for this. We have several historic figures over the last 100 years or so that after digging deep into their history, into their private records, we discovered skeletons in their closets, things that were highly offensive that they were involved in. Some examples, Dennis Hastert, Bill Cosby, and then dozens of Catholic schools are now having to be renamed because of the clergy abuse problem. So my initial feeling is that all these names are absolutely great people, but we almost don't know what we don't know. So we don't know if they've been fully vetted, if there's been investigations. We don't know what they did that may disparage Lee Highway. So I have certain favorites that are not names and that are concepts. And another thing to point out is I think they did a great job in the naming process of Discovery Elementary School. where they chose not to choose a name, but a concept, which had some historic relevance. So the noun discovery and the verb to discover, I think, are both great names for an elementary school. So I encourage the working group to look towards a non-person name.
Lauren.
Sorry about my label being Jeff, but either way. Okay, I just wanted to go through, I think we should take all the names that are similar to street names that are already existing and move them to the no category. I just think that we already have an uphill battle, and there's no reason to even vote on names that we know the county might push back on us on. There's a lot of great names here, and I just don't feel like we need to add or vote on names that we think will make the process harder. So I don't necessarily have much of an opinion on deceased names or people who are living, but I definitely think Alpha Clark Street, Charles P. Monroe, I think I don't see why we have to fight a battle for those names when we have other names that are great. And they aren't, similar to street names already existing. So I just think we should move them to the known category.
Thanks, Lauren. And Maya, can you pull up the slide so people can be reminded of the names we're considering right now? All right, so thanks for that, Lauren. I think maybe we should just take these one by one. So does anyone else have any other thoughts about using a name that is similar to an existing street? And
Annie's hand is up.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. And thanks everybody for all this great work. I totally agree with Lauren for every reason she named. And in addition to the fact that Arlington is already so confusing to navigate with 25th Road and 25th Street and 25th Place and roads that begin and end, and packages getting misdelivered as a result, people getting lost, all kinds of things. And so even GPS getting confused. So just another reason I would be strongly in favor of not having any repetition.
All right, do we have anyone else who wants to weigh in on that?
Bill Braswell.
Yes, if you don't mind. We talked about the deceased 5 years issue yesterday, and I'd like to once again consider bringing that up, because if we think about people who have truly made a national difference in this country, I'd kind of like to see President Obama included on this list as one person, and also our recently deceased Supreme Court Justice.
All right, thanks, Bill. So do we have any other thoughts on the similar to existing street issue? I think let's tackle that right now and decide whether those names should be included in the list you're voting on tonight. I don't know, do we have any other thoughts or comments? And if not, I think we should vote.
I don't know if it's helpful if people want to. I can pull up the spreadsheet again and people can read about who those people were. I don't know if that would be a deciding factor for some folks.
I wanted to add something on that issue of the similar names. May I?
Yeah, no, of course, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree strongly with what Lauren has said and for the reasons that she has given. And I also want to add that in Arlington, there are many different ways of recognizing people. There are buildings, there are parks, so there are many other ways to recognize these people other than a street. So I would prefer not to have any street replicate the names. And like Annie said, Arlington is already considered very confusing to many of our neighbors. We don't want to make it more confusing.
I also just want to add one small thing. With James Parks, the street name is Park, singular. There's no Parks, plural street. It's food for thought.
All right, and then does anyone feel like it's not a big deal to have a name that's similar to an existing street?
I'm seeing Saunders' hand up.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. So the only name that would stay on that list would be Joan Mulholland if we delete it. We would delete everyone but Joan.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
We could vote on that too.
Okay, just get
separately.
clarity. Okay.
Jim Todd.
This is probably an issue of timing, but several colleges, including the one I went to, have removed Woodrow Wilson's name. And I just read today that DC is removing Wilson from the high school. And I suspect that soon after we rename Lee Highway, that Wilson Boulevard will get renamed. I don't know if that changes our thoughts about Frank Wilson or not.
Jeff Joseph.
Thanks. This is somewhat off, but maybe this will be helpful. As part of the discussion of the redevelopment, has there been any discussion about creating memorials or memorial parks? The thought being that, you know, that there may be other ways to honor some of these people with names that don't necessarily mean renaming, that may not apply to the renaming of the street. So it may be helpful if you could share with us any plans to recognize some of these icons, some of these historical figures in other ways, whether along the corridor or elsewhere, that may make part of this discussion less germane, I guess. If you know.
Ginger, do you want me to answer that?
Sure, Sandy, you can answer that.
Okay. So I think, Jeff, that there could be ways, certainly through the arts program. You know, Ginger has been working with people on a lot of murals. So that would be one way to do it. We could also do it through Plan Lee Highway with sculpture, which will be one of the considerations for community benefits. So the answer to your question is yes, there could be ways to do that.
To be clear, nothing that's currently under consideration.
Well, it's definitely under consideration in terms of community benefits. We just haven't gotten down to that level of detail.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else on this issue? All right, if not, I would move that we not use a name that is similar to an existing street.
Second.
All right, and I think let's try to have a voice vote on this one. So all those in favor of not using a name that is similar to an existing street, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Any abstentions? No. Okay. So that means that all the names in question down here, except for Joan Mulholland, will be not included in the list you're voting on tonight. And then the last remaining question is whether Joan should be included because she has not passed away. And we heard from Jim. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
Well, one thing that I would say, I can see both sides of the issue. I think if we do include her, then we also include Barack Obama, we also include John Lewis, and we also include, there were a couple of other ones that were either still alive or recently dead. So we'd have to make the same choice for all of them. I see no harm in including them, because including them doesn't mean that we'll end up choosing them. So for now, I would say yes, but on the basis that we also include the other people who we excluded for the same reason.
I would argue that we had talked about, we left out all of the national figures purposefully, but there was a list of national figures and we left them off because we wanted to brand it as a more local Main Street versus using national figures. I would not support including living folks or national figures.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the only reason Joan Mulholland was on the to discuss list is for that reason, because she has obviously a strong local connection. And the subcommittee, when we met on Saturday, decided that it would make more sense to have a name that had a local connection and wasn't a national figure. And that's the reason why Ruth Bader Ginsburg and President Obama and John Lewis were not included on the list of 39 names.
The Lauren's hand.
No, Matt said exactly what I wanted to say. So that was it.
Mike Hogan.
I just wanted to ask a question. My understanding is that the deceased for at least 5 years is not just a rule that we adopted, but rather a wider sort of Arlington rule. My perception was that John Glenn Elementary School was named Discovery because he wasn't deceased 5 years, and that it was an Arlington-wide rule. If that's the case, then, you know, that's even more hard and fast than similar street names. So
that rule applies to parks and schools. I think that it does not necessarily, while it is a precedent, I think that if we remember correctly, the roads aren't part of that.
Okay, thank you, Ginger. I would just, you know, in general, I think Joan Mulholland was a wonderful person. But I think that there are hundreds of kids at Bill Cosby Elementary who learned the hard way. So I would caution against it in general.
Mike Cantwell.
I think the 5-year deceased rule is prudent because we don't have access to their personal records and they haven't been fully vetted. So nothing to disparage the people on the list or the living people on the list, but it is prudent to wait 5 years.
Should we vote?
Sure. So I'll move that we do not include names of people who have not died within the last 5 years.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of not including Joan Mulholland in this case, names that of people who have not died in the last 5 years, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Aye.
All right. So sounds like the ayes have it. So we will not include Joan Mulholland on the list you are voting on tonight. All right, well, with that, we will open up to a broader discussion of the list we sent around a couple of days ago. And I know Jim already raised some thoughts about it, but anyone else want to discuss it?
Should we go through the names first?
Sure. All right, do you go up a little bit more? Or is that just the category?
That's just a category.
Okay, so the first name is Edward T. Morton. I don't know if you all want me to read a summary of who that person was, but I think
hopefully everyone had a chance to read it. However, there are some folks on the working group that might have a special connection to these people that might want to say on their behalf.
Wilma, I suggested this name. Dr. Edward T. Morton was the first Negro or Black physician in North Arlington in the Halls Hill neighborhood. His home is where the McDonald's is on Lee Highway. His practice was in the lower level of there, and he caused quite a commotion because he was a candidate for the county board in the 1930s. And part of the whole issue that the Civic Federation is looking at in terms of the ways that the county changed how folks were elected was done during his time. So he has great significance, and his two daughters, one was a teacher at the segregated Langston School, and the other was a nurse for the second Black doctor in North Arlington, Dr. Harold Johnson, who was part of his children were plaintiffs in the segregation, in the desegregation lawsuits. So that was why he was suggested.
So for Gwendolyn Green, there was some questions during the subcommittee meeting, and it's important to know that we did find out that Gwendolyn Green ended up in Maryland and was actually a Maryland state senator. She was in the photographs of the lunch counter sit-ins. So she has a nice name, and she was in those photos, but she is not from Arlington. She was a Howard University student. So just something to note.
All right, the next one was James Brown. I don't know if anyone on the subcommittee wants to mention why we chose him.
Yeah, again, he was chosen because when we were doing the meeting on Saturday, we were talking about whether there were people who were actual, because Gwendolyn Green was suggested because of participation in the lunch counter protest, and James E. Brown, who is also known as Reverend Brown, lived actually right next to Langston School on North Culpeper Street. He was a part of those lunch counter protests, and he was also the president of the NAACP when the desegregation happened in 58, 59. So we thought if we were going to suggest Gwendolyn Green, we could also list someone who has a closer connection to the Lee Highway corridor and Arlington history.
Thank you, Wilma. And John Reed. I don't recall who suggested that one.
I think this one just came from not on the working group.
So some conversation around this name focused on the fact that this goes back to the Civil War era, and as a consensus overall, we as the subcommittee agreed that we preferred to not have a name that dated back to that era, specifically because we're trying to move beyond that with removing the name Lee.
Matt, I have a quick question.
Sure.
As a point of order, I think it'd be good to have every name have kind of an advocate to say why we should have it or not. I think Wilma did a good job on the previous names, but as we go through the list, maybe someone can advocate for every name.
Sure, and yeah, and some of these names came in from members of the public, and they weren't members of the subcommittee. So I think in that case, we'll just try to summarize why we thought the person was worth including on the list. All right, next name. All right, so John Langston. I think most of you have heard of him, but I don't know if anyone in the subcommittee wants to.
Sandra, do you want to take this one? Or Wilma?
Sandra, you want to take it, or I can take it?
Okay, I'll take it. We know that Langston School is named after John M. Langston, but he was the first Black person elected to the Congress from Virginia. And he, John M. Langston is the school where the first students that integrated the schools in the state of Virginia, they all graduated from Langston. So, that is a connection to Lee Highway because Stratford is on that corridor. And, as a side, his nephew was named Langston Hughes, but we thought that his significance to the state, to the corridor, to the desegregation, all of those things kind of weighed heavy in terms of keeping him on the list.
Great, thank you, Sandra. All right, next name. It's not Joan because we decided not to name it after someone who's still alive.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt. Mara has her hand up.
Okay.
Langston was actually one of the ones that the Institutional Advisory Group kind of pointed out as one of the names that's already been recognized in the community. And because there are so many other names of community members who've done amazing things at Arlington, that Langston and other similar names that are already used in parks, et cetera, in Arlington be pushed further down the list, if not excluded altogether.
I would agree with that.
All right, thank you. Leonard Doc Muse. I don't know if anyone on the subcommittee wants to be his advocate, or if anyone in the work, or anyone
Let Sandra get that one.
Okay.
Well, he opened up a pharmacy in Green Valley that serviced Black people throughout Arlington County. And I think it probably closed no more than 4 or 5 years ago. He made a lot of contributions to the NOC community in terms of supporting all types of community initiatives. So I don't know who put his name on the list, but that's who Dr. Muse was. He's a graduate of Howard University too.
Great, thank you, Sandra.
I see, I see Bill's hand up.
Yes, please. The Green Valley Civic Association and then the county board just approved the name of a park down in, what's the new name of Green Valley? I'm sorry.
It's Green Valley.
It's Green Valley.
Okay, well, I'll get it wrong someday. Didn't they name the park after Doc Muse?
John Robinson.
That's a good point, Bill. Let's.
Just recently, within the last month or two.
I thought the park was going to be named after John, but I don't.
It is. That is
They
incorrect.
did change it.
Yeah, so yeah, JD, go ahead.
Yeah, it's John. It's going to be named John Robinson, not Leonard Muse.
All right.
I also saw Mike Hogan's hand up.
I just had a question about what the subcommittee's interpretation was with regard to whether names, some of these names brand the corridor and check that box and others don't. And, you know, my view of what branding is may be different from what they were thinking. You know, my view is probably that no names brand the corridor per se, but how come Doc Muse doesn't and Joan Trumpauer Mulholland doesn't, but, you know, previous people do?
Can I?
If I could just mention, Doc Muse was on the branding. I don't know if Desiree is still on this
here.
call, but Doc Muse was on the branding advisory group's list.
It was, Cindy, I'm here.
Ah.
So Mike, this one resonated with many of the branding committee from a history perspective, but I would say that there were a few that we thought actually hit on that elusive mix of being both a concept that elevated the corridor at the same time that it touched on history. And so we submitted a list of 20, but there were some that we thought did a better job of branding than others. In the case of Doc Muse, people liked the somewhat, I mean, just the name Doc is something that is friendly and welcoming to some people, and it encouraged people to learn more about this particular gentleman and his impactful access to both white and Black residents of Arlington at that time. But I hear you on that that question. I think it's there.
He doesn't brand the corridor though?
No.
But
I'm sorry, what's your
Doc
question?
Morton does?
No, I was saying that
The branding committee said yes.
the branding committee thought that Doc Muse had just the name itself and the lightheartedness of Doc Muse was a bit more accessible.
Subcommittee disagreed.
Minna?
On the spreadsheet, it's not marked.
So I think what's happening is Mike's asking the question, and sorry to cut you guys off. I think Mike's question is to the smaller 12 of us that were on the call on Saturday. And I think what his question is why didn't we put that Leonard Doc Muse brands the corridor from this template? And the reason, and anyone from that smaller group subcommittee, I was there, but anyone else can chime in if you feel differently. But I think the reason why we said is some of these names have a harder time branding the corridor because they don't have a connection directly to Lee Highway or a section of Lee Highway. But I can't remember the one we just went over, the Edward T. Morton. His house was directly on the corridor, and he's a business owner, and his business was on the corridor. And so that I think was how we were interpreting the difference. You can see, but a lot of names itself, we didn't, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I thought the work group or the smaller group, the subcommittee group, didn't feel like it branded the corridor, but some of the other things did. So that's kind of where we were going with them. I think that was the answer to your question. I think that's what you were asking.
Right. And just to add to
And
that, yes, thank you. Just to add to that, and in terms of how it brands a corridor, there was also a suggestion that day that if we have a name like Edward Morton, it gives us the opportunity to do things like walking tours of the corridor in terms of talking about where he lived. And we saw a whole opportunity there for branding it by actually having people get interested in the very local history of the corridor. It also brings us back to the Main Street aspect of the corridor, because back in the day that that he was there, it was a type of Main Street and there were all sorts of different offices and shops at that point. So for me, that's why I felt it very strongly branded Lee Highway as a corridor.
Grace?
I'm not sure that that was the intention of that criteria in terms of branding of the name. I'm guessing branding has more to do with how it can be used in publicity. And so I don't think it needs to be tied to Lee Highway for it to be appropriately branding. It's more of an advertising and appealing name versus something that's directly tied. I think there's other things that will fit that criteria. I don't think the branding one is necessarily that, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I think this discussion illustrates, we had a similar discussion in the subcommittee meeting. This criteria was a little hard to evaluate, but you'll probably notice if you go through the names, we didn't say many names branded the corridor for that reason. So yeah, it was a fairly difficult criteria to evaluate, but I think that's the reason why very few names met that criteria. So anyone else? Well, thanks. That was a good discussion. Nicostin. So if anyone in the subcommittee wants to be the advocate for that.
I'll speak to it, or Maya can. This one was brought up by the branding committee because it was the local Indian tribe, and they were in Roosevelt Island. So they just thought it was a great story to tell sort of the beginning of the history. So, I mean, you can read, they were the closest Native American tribe to the Lee Highway corridor, sort of at the bottom of it.
It also, we discussed at the meeting on Saturday that utilizing this name would be a land acknowledgement of, whose land we are living on, working on, and who was here before us.
All right, and then the last one for the names that we included on the list was John Glenn. I think everyone knows who John Glenn is. And since we put him on the list here, we obviously he lived in Arlington, but we think the reason he lived here is because he was a senator from Ohio. And obviously had to have a place to live while he was here in Congress. So the connection to Arlington maybe is not as strong as we initially thought on Saturday, but obviously he was a great American. And he did some tremendous things in the 60s and 70s as part of the NASA program. So I don't know if anyone else in the subcommittee wants to add any additional color to John Glenn.
Paul's hand is up.
Yeah, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that he lived in Arlington while he was an active astronaut before he became a senator.
Yes.
Yeah, in the early 1960s and it would be the early 1960s. So, and I do think that's one of the reasons why Discovery is named what it is. He was still living at the time Discovery was named, and so I think that's why maybe that name was chosen. I believe his home, which I think was just recently torn down, is in that area.
So does he fall into the category of something else, something that's already been sort of commemorated? Is Discovery close enough, or?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, that's my personal opinion on why it wasn't named after him. But
and has it been 5 years?
No, he died in 2016, so it's a little bit close. So
yeah.
But I think we had another person on this list that died 3 years ago. So we might need to get a ruling on people that are less than 5 years.
Well, we'll see if he makes the final list. The question was, do we want to keep him on the survey list for the vote tonight?
I would just say, Mike Hogan, I do. I knew John Glenn really well for 25 years. He and his wife Annie lived here for 40 years. And he did great things in the areas of education and civil rights and lawmaking after he was an astronaut. I think he was just a great person. That's my personal opinion. It doesn't mean anyone else should vote for him, but I would recommend keeping him on the list.
Okay.
And can I just add that I think because you've raised discovery and some people have more or less tenuous ties to Arlington, under our broader ideals, would it be both becoming in memory of John Glenn, but also in terms of the future to consider the word discovery, which we didn't on Saturday?
Street name?
I think we're opening up something of names that were not considered. We would have to go back and consider other names that were not put on the list back then.
And I think that there's already an elementary school named after it.
Yeah, we passed the deadline.
Yeah.
Deadline's today.
Yeah.
It's a yes or no. I'm good. I'm good.
All right, moving on to neighborhoods, places, and roads. ARCOVA was the first one, and that's an acronym for Arlington County, Virginia.
I think this one, just everyone thought it was clever. And so everyone likes it.
And this one, we did think it could brand the corridor. You know, it's a catchy name and could be used for marketing, but as Ginger said, it was mostly we thought it was clever. Cardinal is
Sorry,
Great. Isn't there already a neighborhood? Or am I?
That's Alcova, I think.
Oh, it's
Alcova.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very
Alcova
good.
Heights.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think in terms of confusion, that strikes me as really close.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the way, I wish Alcova wasn't taken, but it's too close.
All right, next one's Cardinal, which is the Virginia state bird. In this one, part of the thinking, it was obviously has connections to the state, the Commonwealth as a whole, and Northern Virginia in particular. So this one we think would, conceivably have more of a regional application than some of the particular names.
I think this and the next one, Cardinal and Dogwood, also kind of go with our environmental biophilic focus for planning Lee Highway. Dogwood we could plant dogwood trees all up and down the corridor and brand it that way. So I think those were reasons beyond just a connection to the state.
All right, and then the next one.
Jim Todd had his hand up.
Right.
I just have two comments on dogwood. One, it's a tree that it's a native tree, but it's under threat of extinction. So I just want to make sure nobody goes and plants a bunch of dogwoods because they'll all be dead.
Right.
And also, developers heavily abused that name in the 1950s on just about every dead-end street in every suburb in America. So it just doesn't feel very original to me.
All right, thanks, Jim. Anyone else?
Or Dogwood Street in Arlington.
No.
So maybe not every suburb in America.
Yeah. There's some flexibility.
Yeah. All right, the next one's Halls Hill. I don't know if anyone in the subcommittee wants to speak to that.
I don't want to speak to it, but I do have a question. The subcommittee had questions for Wilma, but she had to leave early about this name because we were conflicted on whether we wanted to push it forward to the group or not. And so just to reiterate some of our questions / concerns on Saturday, Ms. Wilma or Ms. Sandra, we were wondering how you guys felt about it being on here. We weren't sure if it would be offensive since, the slave master's wife was Hall, and we just wanted to figure out what your thoughts were here. We also knew that we were trying to stay away from branding specific communities on the corridor, like Cherrydale only or Maywood only. And this would, you know, but Halls Hill has a bigger impact, but we didn't get to hear your thoughts. And so we are looking for some guidance here. And I don't think, I at least wanted to hear that before we talked about it.
Right. I'll let Sandra go first.
Well, I think that, I don't know if any of the other neighborhoods were suggested. But I think that if Halls Hill is on the list, that it would give pause for people to say, why can't some of the other communities be on the list? Why would this community be represented on the list when others were not? It certainly has a lot of history. This community, Halls Hill, has a lot of history on Lee Highway, probably unlike some other communities. The fire station, Callaway Church, the fact that there was a Black business district at one time. So, you know, some of that people probably don't know, some of that history. So, but I think that it would cause other communities to ask the question as to why Halls Hill and not Cherrydale or not some of the others.
I think the reason why is because we gave Halls Hill the public awareness of cultural history and racial equality, and the other ones didn't get that ticker because we knew about the other, and that gave it the 3 to move forward. But we just weren't sure what that meant for everyone in general. So sorry, I'll let you go now, Wilma.
I'm sorry. So I'm speaking now as Wilma, not from the Citizens Association's perspective or anything. But I agree with Sandra, because I think that the other neighborhoods, the other 13 neighborhoods on Lee Highway will have an issue. But I think that in terms of the criteria, I think that Halls Hill has a unique, I think that, you know, that name brings some unique perspectives, but it also, again, because of the fact that the hall is the name of the slave owner, I'm not sure that recognizing one of the previous names of the people from Halls Hill wouldn't be better, but I think that it should remain, and we should hear what the greater Arlington community has to say in the survey from my perspective.
I would agree with that.
Julius?
Yeah, I just want to align my comments with Sandra and Wilma, but I am a bit concerned about the negative connotation associated with a plantation owner, just from an NAACP perspective. So I'll just share that with you. Thanks.
Diane?
And I wanted to say that there were other neighborhoods on the list, and we felt that Halls Hill was not a neighborhood in the sense of Cherrydale. It was a place where there was a sense of history. But in correspondence with what JD just said, there was, on Saturday, we had concerns about the fact that it was named after a plantation owner. And we had other names to consider that were people who came from that area, who had accomplished something, or people who had come from other areas on, you know, the general Lee Highway corridor and South Arlington, obviously, whose names mean something today to people in terms of what the future of the highway is and what the past was. So we did think about other communities, and we said, no, we didn't really think that represented what we were looking for.
Mike Hogan.
So I live right next door to Halls Hill and have worked with the community extensively. And so I defer to Wilma and others there. But my understanding is that Hall wasn't just a plantation owner, but was his wife, certainly a brutal and mean slave owner who, you know, the slaves rose up and pushed her into the fire because she was such a wicked person. I'm afraid if we named it Halls Hill, we'd be renaming it again, because the Halls, you know, were certainly worse than Robert E. Lee in the local area. But I defer if that's
No,
wrong, let me know.
That's a great point. We didn't know that on Saturday.
Well, no, I mean, I talk about that in my book. His first wife was killed when her personal maid, Jenny, couldn't take anymore and pushed her into the hearth. And that was part of my perspective of saying, I think that some of the names that we have spoken of earlier, like Dr. Morton or Doc Muse or Reverend Brown or other ones would be more, and again, I think that we talked on the call on Saturday about going away from things that were of the Confederate time frame. So from that perspective, if they want to knock it off, I don't have an issue about it. But it definitely will harken back to the slave day.
All right, well, it sounds like we have some support to take the Halls Hill name off of the survey that we're voting on tonight. So I don't know, do we want to have a vote on that or unanimous consent to take it off? How do you want to handle it? I suggest a real quick vote.
I think we should leave everything on till the end. This is the final list here.
Okay.
Matthew, before we proceed, can I just say a note on Cardinal? At
Sure.
least for those who care about the defending champions, the Nationals, the National League is inclusive of the Cardinals from St. Louis. And I think it's a little off-putting for so many people who care about that team to drive down Cardinal whatever. I just think that baseball is rising in prominence, and we might regret that down the line to have a major competitive team have their road named after them.
Excuse me, I would like to offer that I am very strongly opposed to having anything named after Mr. Hall. He was a slave owner. He was not good to his slaves. As someone said, his wife was we do not want to refer back and have anybody believe that we have any affection or any affiliation with slavery. I suggest we get this off that list now.
All right, thanks, Bill. Well, I think Mike and others suggested we go through all the names and then we'll do some cleanup at the end before we vote. So we'll certainly get to that in a few minutes.
Or perhaps, another option is we take the vote and it might not even be on the list. And if it is, then maybe we can have further discussion about that, but.
As a point of order, I'd like to keep it on the list.
Yeah, let's just keep going through the names and then at the end we can address it. All right.
Well, I meant survey. We take the survey, it might not even be on the list. No one might vote for it on the survey is what I'm saying.
At the end, yeah.
So just leave it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to a broader
process question. I just want to clarify what we're doing here, just so I'm clear. So as we have this discussion about leaving things on and off the list, so our vote tonight will be to approve the yes list in full.
No, after we go through the list and we finish our discussion, then each of you need to go to your email
and then we vote in and pick the ones.
And you get to pick your top 10.
Right.
And then we're going to cull the bottom of the list so that we'll end up with 20 names.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, you're taking names off the list by not voting for a name.
Right.
Right.
But if there's, all right. And I could argue if there's unanimous consent or there seems to be strong consent that certain names shouldn't be on here, is it want to do that process now?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff on that. I can see the value to doing it at the end, but I think that if we come across a name where it seems to me like there are very strong, clear reasons why to take it off the list, we just take it off the list with a quick vote now and we continue. We don't have to do that for every name, but this one seems to me as if there's some pretty strong reasons to take it off the list right now.
Right.
Lauren. And at the subgroup committee, we did say that anything that's offensive needs to come off the list.
Right.
So I don't see, right now we're saying that this is extremely offensive.
Right.
For me, there's no reason to vote on the offensive name.
I'm not seeing a groundswell of support unless someone wants to speak out in support of that name. Why keep it on the list to have people, just sort of cleans things up, makes the process a little cleaner, a little easier.
I'd like to defer to to Wilma and Sandra on this. I mean, their current community is called Halls Hill, and I don't think they've taken efforts to rename their community.
Actually,
They weighed in.
renamed in about either it was renamed in the 60s to Highview Park. It's just that we haven't let go of Halls Hill, so which is why everything is kind of Halls Hill - Highview Park. But Sandra, I'll defer to what's your perspective?
Well, I think, I don't have a problem with it coming off the list. The formal name for Halls Hill is Highview Park. That's what the county recognizes it as. A lot of locals that grew up still call it Halls Hill.
Okay.
So, but I have no problem with it coming off the list.
Okay. Thanks, Sandra. I appreciate that.
Do we want to vote or just take it off?
I vote to take it off.
Yeah, do we have unanimous consent to take Halls Hill off, and then it won't be on the survey when we take the survey? And
Yes.
next
Well,
week?
let's take it off.
Let's do a formal vote. Or, aye.
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 Okay, so Halls Hill will not be on the survey when you vote in a few minutes. Our broader ideals, so these are in contrast, obviously, to the specific names that we put on the list. And the first one we talked about was equity. Equity is obviously a county policy priority right now. And I don't know if anyone in the subcommittee wants to talk about why we chose it.
Well, it is a goal of the county, as recently rolled out, and it's just an ideal that I think we all aspire to. That ages well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Ginger. I mean, we aspire to get there, but we're not quite there yet. So I think we still open-ended for me on that.
It's definitely aspirational.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah, and then similar story for a lot of these names. They're very aspirational, forward-thinking, and it's a large reason why we chose them. So the next one is Greenway. I don't know, Sandy or Ginger, if you want to talk about this one.
Sandy, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So Greenway, it's based on LHA's guiding principles of conservation. And as I mentioned earlier, greening the corridor, which is so important. And I see in the notes that you all made, the Dulles Toll Road has Greenway. Greenway and street name is confusing. The original name was Green, separate word, capital W Way, Greenway. It wasn't Greenway Street or Greenway Boulevard. So that's to answer that question.
All right. Next one is innovation.
Sort of speaks for itself. It's
Yeah. And I think
aspirational.
part of the connection we came up with was, we think of technology and
jobs.
And the internet was at least can be partially credited to be created at the Pentagon, which has the Arlington connection. So, that was some of the thinking behind innovation.
Jim Todd,
I'll just comment that it's another boosterism name from the mid-20th century that was popular in a lot of southern cities as they cleared out historically African-American business districts. So to me, it's on the same as Prosperity Boulevard or Progress Boulevard, but other people can have other opinions.
This is Mike. If we're talking about this, I think, these are words that have had meaning well before they were co-opted. And my view personally is that by expunging their existence after they were co-opted, you're allowing those people to own those names. And I think I would like to do the opposite of that.
Desiree?
On innovation? I would say that of the list of names that came through on ideals, there were, I think, others that had higher resonance with the branding group. However, given the central location of Arlington with a lot of top technology firms and the growth that we're going to see, I think it speaks to the future of this, the type of community that we're trying to build, and the foundation of which is going to grow, which is innovation. There's nothing wrong with it. There's also, I think there are other names on the list that potentially have more appeal.
All right, thank you. Next one, Loving, which is both, I think, an ideal and a name. So I think anyone that's, yeah, I'm sure someone in the subcommittee wants to talk about this one.
Desiree, you should also maybe talk about this.
I definitely, I'll wait for the committee, but I definitely will.
Okay.
Desiree, I think you should go first because this was a big conversation at the branding committee, and I'd like to add something.
Okay. So I'll just say from the outset that I did not nominate this name. I was, when I joined the branding committee, it was to support and whatever names came through. But when we did see this name, the reason why it struck us is because, yes, it works on this aspirational ideal in terms of the values that we're trying to project as an Arlington community, but it is also deeply grounded in a powerful and resonating story of Mildred and Richard Loving, who had the courage to demand the right to marry, and regardless of their race, and because of their steadfastness and courage in that endeavor, they enabled interracial marriages to be recognized and protected in that landmark Supreme Court decision in 1967. What I sent over to the group, because I felt pretty passionate about this name, was that it works on multiple different levels. On an intellectual level, for many people who are less familiar with why they're able to marry certain people, it works on a level where we are trying to educate people on why we have certain rights. And frankly, it was the basis for the SCOTUS decision allowing gay marriage. So it has applications not just race, but also on gender equality. Second, on an aspirational level, many of us spoke to how, for many people, the drivers, the cyclists, the pedestrians, you're coming in from DC, the first street that you turn onto into Arlington is currently Lee Highway. What better way to counteract that history than to have a name that frankly tells people that as a community, as business owners, as institutions, as neighbors, that we're going to engage in a lovingly, respectful, and constructive manner. And then lastly, just on an emotional level, we have tens of thousands of people who are driving and engaging on that corridor every single day. And I think that it reinforces to people that they should be leading with warmth and goodwill and care and compassion for those who live here. And so in total, we said that it's simplistic in its power. It's definitely unifying and the ambition that it's trying to push towards. And it, unlike a lot of the other ideals, it has historical resonance specifically to Virginia. And the lawyer who just passed away last week discussed how there was traffic back and forth between Virginia and DC as he was handling that case with the couple. So I think it connects on that level as well.
I would just add that, obviously there's a historical Virginia is for lovers. And also if you wanted to do a shop local, you could do Loving Local. So.
Which we hope to do.
All right, thank you all. Next one, Progress. I think Jim spoke to this one already, but anyone else want to chime in?
I'll speak to that one. Matt?
Sure, go ahead.
Part of the reason this one emerged as one of the list to forward onto the working group, I think, was in recognition of some of the guidance that Matt and others had gotten from the Commonwealth Transportation Board and County Board, that we needed to have a good array of names that worked, as potentially could work, for all 4 jurisdictions. It also was in keeping with the LHA principles in that the corridor reflect a forward-looking, future-looking mentality and attitude. but it also had a good layer of sort of multiple meanings, if you will. So while we've made some progress in terms of civil rights, we still have many, many miles to go. And so it is both a recognition of that state of being that we're always still trying to strive to do better in that area in particular. And then there are other areas in which we've not really done much at all, like environmental sustainability, which is another of the Lee Highway principles, and making progress in areas like that, sort of in tandem with Sandy's Greenway idea, would give us several different layers to communicate on and to build a story that would work well as a branding opportunity.
Thank you, Elaine. Next one, abolitionist.
So I guess just for the sake of time, and also because it's relevant, the remainder of the broader ideals names, it was, a lot of them did meet at least 3 criteria, whether they were really liked or just sort of viewed as okay by the subcommittee. I think maybe abolitionist was the only one out of the remaining list that was viewed as the more exciting of the remainder of the list. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. That's my memory. Go ahead.
I guess I'd be curious to know if there's any that in particular stand out or that people want to speak on behalf of.
Nope.
Jim Todd.
I'll jump down to inclusionary if that's what you're asking. Can we change that? And I'm sorry to sort of make a last minute suggestion to inclusive, because inclusionary is a really clumsy word. It's like utilize instead of use. And for what it's worth, one of the most impactful fair housing organizations in the country is called the Inclusive Communities Project. It's actually a big Supreme Court case about the Fair Housing Act that has their name in it. And inclusive, for example, is actually like Cherrydale's motto is a welcoming and inclusive community. So inclusive is not a clumsy word, and inclusionary is just about the clumsiest word I can imagine.
Think of inclusionary zoning.
Mike Cantwell.
Yes, I'd like to advocate for Main Street. I think it aligns with all the guiding principles of the Lee Highway Alliance and the rules and the criteria of the working group. We have a unique opportunity because Arlington does not have a Main Street, and therefore this would really be a unifying name for all of Arlington to name Lee Highway Main Street.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else want to speak to the broader ideals suggestions?
Minna.
Yes, I think as a general point with the higher ideals, I personally think that it's much more powerful, for example, to give the road the name of somebody who was an abolitionist, rather than to give it the title Abolitionist Street. Like we said at the subgroup, it's the difference between showing and telling. And so many of these ideals, to me, they sound very vague in theory, and it would be, for me, it would be better to pick any ideal, even diversity, to name it Mildred and Richard Loving, because that is the ideal that we're trying to do. So in general, I just thought that the names of the ideals were less powerful than picking somebody who actually exemplified those ideals and naming it for that person.
When we had spoken on Saturday, I would also add that the concept of Main Street could be claimed by a number of streets in Arlington. And we thought it a little less important to name it that than to name it after something that people desire the corridor to be idealized as or remembered for. For instance, Wilson Boulevard could be a main street, Columbia Pike could be Main Street, Washington Boulevard could be Main Street. We're not competing with one another here. We're looking for a branding and historic linchpin, I think, for the name.
All right, thank you, Diane. All right, I think we're almost to the end here, and then we'll get to the real fun part of the evening, which is voting. So
Just had his hand
I
up.
want to take 1 second too before we vote. There's a couple of questions from the audience.
do we have any more names after the broader ideals? I don't think we do. Oh, we do actually. We have a couple.
Not very many.
Yeah. All right, so you want to answer the Q&A questions real fast, and then we'll move on?
Did you want to talk about Ella Baker?
Yeah, let's just talk about the rest of the names and do the Q&A and then vote. All right, so next we talked about some names that were applicable to Virginia history. And the first one was Ella Baker. Anyone in the subcommittee want to advocate for Ella Baker?
I don't remember us having much of a discussion about this. It just struck us that it fit these 3 categories.
I agree.
Yeah. Jim Todd.
I'll speak up just to say I still love the idea of actually having a street named after a woman because there are so few of them. The only street that I can think of in Arlington after a woman is George Washington's stepdaughter, Nellie Custis. And then we don't really have that many others in the whole greater DC area. So I'll vote, I'll speak up on behalf of Ella Baker for that reason. And I think she's a lovely person who did wonderful things.
Yeah, to add to that, I think during the meeting, we thought that Ella Baker was a wonderful person, but had no ties locally to North Arlington or to Virginia. So that's why I think that there's a hesitation. It wasn't a name that many of us were excited about. And on your point about women, I would just say that if we named it Mildred and Richard Loving, then that would also be the name of a woman put in there. And I think that if we name it Loving, I really would love to put the 2 names there because for me, that's very powerful. It would be the Mildred and Richard Loving Boulevard or Avenue or whatever.
I agree.
All right, thank you. The next 2 names, the Monacans and the Petawomecs. They're both Native American tribes with significant historical roots in Virginia. And, you know, they satisfy the same 3 criteria. You know,
We just wanted to, they're flagged because we wanted to mention that we do have a Native American tribe that is local.
Right. All right, next one.
Monacan's based in Richmond. There's a whole high school and neighborhood after that. It might be confusing to those who are familiar with both jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
So Nacoston is the local tribe.
All right, and the last name we put on the list is Maggie Walker.
Same note with Richmond. There's a Maggie Walker's Governor's School, but I'll let that slide.
I also think she didn't have any local connection. Maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I think that she's a national figure who didn't have much of a connection either to Arlington or to Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she is from Virginia.
Okay.
But she's not from Arlington, and I don't think she had any bank branches here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think just from you know, we've talked a little bit about the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I think the connection to you know, a broader Virginia, I think could be okay in this situation.
And I think I was the one that suggested this name again because it's an African-American woman who did wonderful things, both for showing a leader among women, because she's the first woman to own a bank and the first African-American to own a bank in the United States. And I think she is from I think she's from Norfolk and developed her businesses in Richmond.
All right, thanks, Jim. That is it for the name.
So I would just, I just wanted to come back to, I would support Jim's recommendation to change inclusionary to inclusive. I don't know how others feel about that, but I think
I second that.
Yeah.
it just improves the name for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think that's big. Okay.
All right, do you want to take a vote real fast? All those in
Yes.
favor of changing inclusionary to inclusive, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No. All right, so we changed inclusionary to inclusive. All right, Ginger, do you want to go answer a few Q&As real fast, and then we'll send the survey out. Give Maya real fast a chance to make that change real fast for inclusive, and then we'll send out the survey to vote.
So we can look at the questions. So I guess the one question, we have an audience member who submitted a name, and it was a William Lee, and he has a George Washington's personal secretary and was instrumental in the Revolutionary War. He would have been a hero if he were white. He was born a slave but died a free man. And so he was wondering why we didn't consider him. We did consider those names, but that the group voted that we weren't going to rededicate the highway to another Lee, that we were going to, and took the probably list of a couple of dozen off the list. And so he wanted to throw that behind because of because of the story be considered. I just wanted to throw that out there.
My understanding was our charge was to remove the name Lee and the name Highway from the road. I'm sure he was a great person, and unfortunately born with the same name as a less great person, but I don't think we can violate our charge because that's where we are.
Yeah, and we adopted a rule saying we would strike any name that has the name Lee in it. So it was a good suggestion, but it just couldn't make the list because of that rule.
If we are talking about the civil rights era, should we consider Martin Luther King as a name for this road?
Oh. Bill, we didn't want to do a national figure, and Martin Luther King, while an amazing figure, has many names, many roads named after him, and a memorial just a couple miles from us. And that if we're trying to brand as a main street, it seemed like there was more cool figures that we could find to honor.
Somewhat in the same vein as Martin Luther King, freedom was originally on the list, right? Was it removed for a particular reason?
There
we talked about, sorry, I was gonna say we talked
Go ahead,
about
Ben. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm sorry. I mean, we talked about that word as being hijacked and basically having a different meaning than originally intended. I think there might have been another word, maybe patriot. Somewhere.
It was too political. The Freedom Caucus is the Tea Party, basically, and so it was just too charged for us. So we tried to stay away from some of those, even though it's obviously an ideal and something that we worry about sometimes.
All right, well, Maya just emailed everybody a link to the survey. So open up your email, open up the survey, and choose 10 names, no order of preference, 10 names that you like. And we'll use this survey to call the list from the 38 or 39 we had in the chart, and then get to the final 20 names that we can use to move on to the public polling phase. So I think we'll take a 10-minute break. Everyone vote. We'll come back, and we'll know who the final 20 are.
Quick question.
on
the list.
So can you choose less than 10 names if you want to just choose 5 or 6?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Again, is Joan Mulholland to be voted on or not?
No, she's
Oh,
off
she's
the
still
list.
on there.
Oh, she's on the list.
She's on the survey,
Oh,
and so is inclusionary. Can we agree that inclusionary means inclusive?
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, don't vote for Joan, and inclusionary
Don't.
means inclusive.
Okay. Sounds good.
Halls Hill is still on the list.
Don't vote for that one
So
either.
Don't vote for Halls Hill.
there must be some glitch. I removed those, and let me see if I can fix that and send it out.
So should we wait?
Are you gonna relaunch the poll?
Or if we want, we can just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Vote
vote
for
and
those.
don't vote for those names.
Thank you.
Can you just say those names one more time? Sorry.
Don't vote for
Mulholland.
Halls Hill or Joan Mulholland, and inclusionary means inclusive.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Oh, and James Brown has an E at the end. Just
We are, am I right that we are voting, we could vote for inclusionary, but note that a vote for inclusionary is a vote for inclusive. Is that correct?
Yes.
correct.
All right, so let's give everyone 2 or 3 more minutes and then we'll move on. Or is anyone still voting?
We're still waiting on 4. We only have 21 responses.
So Maya, can you announce when we get all 25?
It will take me probably 2 minutes to gather all of that information. So if folks could submit as fast as possible, that would be great. We still only have 21 responses.
I believe I submitted mine. Maya, maybe can you see whose response you're still waiting for? Some of us may think we have and we haven't.
I can't because you didn't submit your name.
Do we know if there's people that are still working?
That's the next question. Is anyone still working? Is everyone
Need
submitted?
more time?
Is there a chance if you didn't vote for 10, it didn't accept it?
That was my question too. It seemed to accept it. It said done, and I pressed the done button, but I was a little bit concerned that that could be a hiccup.
I only voted for 4 and it looks like it went through.
Are all 25 working group members here?
No, I think we lost a few.
So maybe we're done voting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have 25 participants, but not every participant is on the working group. So maybe we're done. All right, you want to close up the vote, Maya? All right. So Maya's is tabulating the results, and then we'll announce the results and walk through the next steps and end the meeting.
Matt, should we walk through the next steps while she tabulates the results?
Sure. Maya, do you want to pull up the slides, the last couple slides?
I can't share my screen while I'm doing.
Okay.
A quick question or comment while we're waiting. So there's so many great names, it's great history, and obviously there can only be one finalist. I understand there's a process to sort of figure out the future of Lehigh Way itself, but is it appropriate? Is there a process for us to make some sort of formal statement? And it just seems to me that there's such great history along the highway, and if we don't find a way to recognize that in some way that's accessible and easy, we're really missing. It's part of the point of the overall vision of this exercise. So whether that's sort of a recommendation that whatever committee, whatever Arlington committee or council is looking at, recognize that history, look at some of the names that weren't final, or whether it's we make a motion that there be some sort of public recognition of the history. I just feel like we're missing an opportunity it's such a great opportunity to make a statement and to recognize the phenomenal history and the many contributors, and we're going to miss out by just having one name. So I don't know the appropriate way to recognize that or make a recommendation to the county. I'm happy to make a motion if there's an appropriate way to do that.
Yeah, the institutional advisory group, we said something very similar toward the end. And I think that it was discussed with the Lehigh Way Alliance team that perhaps the list itself would be published so that people could see the other names and people that had been submitted, why they were considered, their history, why they're important. So even though they weren't chosen, that everybody could see why they were there.
That's one part of it, but the other part is sort of in perpetuity, right? It's great to sort of list those names and so everyone maybe reads and sees that, but to have one idea might be, a living history space somewhere along Lehigh Way where we tell these stories, or it could even be a virtual thing that goes online or something that goes in community centers. I'm just literally making this up as I talk right now, but there's just amazing history. And part of the point of this is to recognize that history and make it inclusive and tell the broader story. Picking one name isn't going to be able to do that in a truly inclusive and full way. So again, I know that's not part of our charter, but I would propose we make a statement of some sort.
So Jeff, just to respond to that a little bit in perpetuity. So LHA will definitely look at that and try to figure that out. I also wanted to say that a few of us have a meeting next week to talk to the Black Heritage Museum, which has lost its space on Columbia Pike. And we are hoping to bring them to Lehigh Way. We will be looking at a number of spaces that might accommodate their needs. So we definitely agree with you and LHA on LHA's behalf, and we would very much like to figure this out.
Just to follow up on Jeff's point, I mean, there are, I think, a couple things we could do. The Virginia Room at the Arlington Public Library is a repository for a number of Civic Association minutes, but I think maybe this is something, we could share the minutes of this with them, see if that's something they'd be interested in. And then we did meet with some folks from the county manager's office, and they have asked us to share the names and the list of the process we went through with them. So that's another perhaps way of memorializing this.
And I did just want to, Maya, do we have a few more minutes? Do you want me to go ahead and go through the, yeah, okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So I'll just go through the next steps because I think in some ways this is relevant. So tonight we're going to come up with 20 names, and what we're doing next is we're going to be putting that list together, and we're going to be basically constructing a web page with the histories of those, or the reasons why those names were chosen. So we'll be doing a lot of the groundwork for the top 20. The whole list in the report that the subcommittee did will already be posted online, and that has lots of notes. So that's definitely documentation that's already done. But those 20, that list, that the website with the 20, we're also sending out mailers to folks that live along the corridor, pretty close to the corridor, but along the corridor, there's going to be about 12,000 postcards sent out that will have those names and direct them to the website, as well as we'll be sending it out. The county's going to push it out for us. And also we're going to send it out through various partner groups. So there will be quite a large community outreach with our final list, and it will have the stories of those folks if they go to the website. So hopefully they will. So we'll done a lot of that groundwork, and I think it's a fantastic idea to memorialize it and figure out, like, sort of where do we, once we've done that body of work, where do we put it? So I think there's a lot of great ideas. So thank you for the suggestion, and I'm excited about that.
Ginger, can I interject again with my broken record of Old Lee Highway? Is the postcard and the next steps going to also mention the Old Dominion realignment or the Old Lee Highway issue?
No, because that's not resolved. We need to get folks on board. The postcard is, not big enough, and that's going to have to be somewhat of a separate process. And the realignment, that could be taken care of at the same time, but this is just to pick, the top names. And as a reminder, we're picking 5 top names to send forward. So it'll be a survey, so people will get to pick their top probably 3 names, so it doesn't seem so much like voting.
Yeah, just to build on Ginger's next steps and take care of some of the slides that we'll look at later. So between October 23rd and the end of November, we're doing public polling, and that's when people can vote on the names. And the public polling will be an additional input point for the working group to consider when we meet in December 2nd to actually choose the preferred name, the 2 to 4 alternatives. And just a reminder, we voted to have ranked choice voting for that. So I'm gonna work with Mike on getting the technology set up for that, but December 2nd is when we will actually meet to vote on the preferred name, the 2 to 4 alternatives, and that's our next meeting.
And the one other thing we wanted to talk to you about tonight, and this is kind of out of the blue, so hopefully you'll react well to it, but as we were laying out the graphics, and I can show you the graphic that we're going to be making posters, and there's something similar for postcards. We think the names sound better with a second name behind them. I know that we went through this whole process of decoupling them, but it's very hard to explain in a postcard why it doesn't have a second name. And so we'd sort of like to ask your permission. We could do one of 2 things. We could say, well, it's likely going to be a boulevard because major east-west, maybe if we pick Greenway, that would be different because it would be Columbia Pike, Greenway. But in general, major roads in Arlington that go east-west are boulevards. I don't know if we have very many avenues. It could be a boulevard, it could be an avenue. I don't think we have a huge preference, but that we would like to be able to pair the name on the card because it sounds better and it will make people understand those final names better. And so we wanted to see what you thought about that before we just printed them.
I agree with that, Ginger. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I would encourage us to think outside the boulevard box. I think Park Plaza, Gateway, there's a lot of names that have better community feel than just boulevard because it goes east-west.
And Drive, Old Dominion Drive is the main drag through McLean, and it's already Drive is already the part of Route 29 and Route 309 north of that. Drive, and I'll just mention with a longer name, a shorter second name might work as sort of a branding or recognition thing, and with a shorter name, a longer thing like Boulevard might work well. So Smith Boulevard, but I don't know what the longest name we have left is. But anyway,
So
Leonard Dockmuse Drive.
I guess my question is if anybody is, those that don't really care could get off the phone call, and any people that do care that would like input, because we're going to be printing these on probably Friday, that would like to look at the final list and if they have opinions. I mean, we also could say whatever boulevard, we could say, give it 2 names. So we could print it Democracy Avenue or Boulevard or something, so that it's not so certain, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting and put those names behind it. It does make it will make it wordier, so it won't be as clean. But so anybody who's interested in staying after, I'm not sure anybody who cares enough to stay,
Sorry.
opinions.
Ginger, I have a quick question. I'm sorry. I thought the postcard was going out. Maybe I just misheard this. The postcard's going out for these 20 names, or the postcard goes out when we have 10 or 5 names left?
20 names.
20 names. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna send it out. We decided it was better. It's good to have as input, and it gives us the opportunity to sort of highlight more names, honestly. So yeah, we just thought it would be easier to get to that point.
Are you asking for creative ways to position this on the postcard, or is that already set? You're just
That's already set. We just want the permission to be able to add some to make the name sound better.
All right, well, it looks like we have results. So our top 20 names are Loving, John M. Langston, Leonard Doc Muse, Nick Austin, Edward T.
Can you go
Morton.
slowly, Matt?
Sure. Sorry, I'm just recognizing it's 8:30. Unity, Inclusive, Maggie Walker, Arcova, Justice, Community, James E. Brown, John Glenn, Innovation, Dogwood, Equity, Greenway, Main Street, Harmony, and Ella Baker. So those are our top 20 names. Any thoughts, questions before we move on to next steps? All right, well, good work, everyone. That was a lot of hard work to get to the final 20. And now we can move on to next steps.
Matt?
All right, so this is what Ginger was just talking about, and this is what the draft flyer looks like. So I guess the question, Ginger, correct me if I'm wrong, is whether we want to include Boulevard and Avenue to the name. So like John M. Langston Boulevard / Avenue, Loving Boulevard / Avenue.
Or just one name. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, just both, John M. Langston or Loving or whatever.
Can we just make a statement that the names may have one of the following, designations: Boulevard, Drive, Avenue, blah, 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 so that they understand that rather than designating one?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I agree with
I
Wilma.
agree.
Just make it a bullet underneath the we
Right.
create a welcoming piece. Just put it underneath there, and I think
Yeah.
everybody will understand it.
Stay
Yeah.
away from the
Italics or something.
designations, because if people get attached to it, then you're just you lose. If you say, well, if it's
Yeah.
not going to be Boulevard, but I preferred street, like, okay,
Yeah.
it could be one, it could be the other. We're not at that juncture yet.
Right. Just say we're just trying to determine what the core name is going to be, and the rest of that will be determined in the next step.
Right.
One, go ahead, Julius.
Yeah, Matt. So I just want to understand something real quick. I know we're going to rank choice for the public input. Am I correct with that? No? Okay. Okay.
No, the polling is just.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No. The ranked choice is just for us. The
Just
working
for
group on
us.
December 2nd.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The polling is for you, is for we're going to get as much community feedback for you.
All right. Yeah, that's what. Okay.
The decision. So the working group will make the decision. But it is sort of, hopefully it will be helpful to you to get hopefully thousands of opinions.
Yeah, I would just like to pitch in on that. I think like the community polling, it shouldn't be, and I think we all know this, we're all community driven, but just to name it, that community is at the center. And so I know that we won't come back if they come with a name that's completely different than what we're thinking. We won't discount that, we'll really like have, you know, deep conversation about it, because at the end of the day, I imagine the community is people, right, that live on the corridor, and some of us don't. And so, you know, I really value, and I know we all do value, the community opinion.
And Annika, if I may, I think we also have to recognize the moment that we're in, and that, you know, the digital divide everyone's been talking about, right? That a lot of people may not, despite what we put out, participate in this poll in parts of Arlington. So we got to take all that into account when we do our analysis on the backside. Right?
Agreed. But that we will take everything into account.
All right. So
I have a question. So, how are we promoting this poll? Are we sending it to citizens associations?
Yeah, so we're going to be sending it, or we're going to be mailing it to a lot of the mail routes directly along the corridor. We're going to send it to the civic associations to send out. We're going to send it on our listserv. The county is going to help us push it out to a broader audience. We have institutions, so it's going to go to Swanson, Williamsburg, Key. We're going to put it in Peach Jar, so it'll go out to all the families. We have churches involved that can send it on their lists. Businesses involved that can send it out to their customers. So hopefully we're going to do a broad outreach and get as many people to our website as possible.
And Ginger, there will also be the Shop Local event on November 28th.
Yeah, and we're working with Sun Yoga and Sterling Framers, who has artists and art galleries. We're going to have a Shop Local event that we can have sort of a pop-up so people could walk up and give their feedback in person as well.
So one more question. When they click this link, is it just going to be the name, or is there going to
No. So that's something I was going to bring up as well. So the way it's going to work is the QR code is going to take them to a new page we're making on our website, on LHA's website. That will have graphics of every single name on the list of 20. That will include information on who or what they are and why they were selected, and what the importance of that is. So people are able to read about and understand what those names are before they vote. So it's basically, if people are being forced to learn about the names, they will scroll to the bottom and that will take them to a link to a survey. And those graphics will also be shared on LHA's social media.
Great. May I interject for just a second to say that this process has a lot of moving parts and is quite complicated, and it's been quite inclusive. And I just want to say thank you very much to people like Steve and Ginger and et cetera. So enough nice things said.
Thanks, Bill.
Can I also just say thank you to you all for putting this together and the yeoman's work that went into doing all of this. But can I ask and make one point? If the objective is to get people to fill out a survey, may I encourage the reverse? If you're going to click on the QR code, let it take you directly to this, if possible, directly to the survey. The goal is to fill out the survey. If people want, and then flip it, if people want more information about why, they're able to get to that information at some other juncture. But I mean, the idea I would hope is that try to get them right to the survey, to do the survey as quickly as possible without having to jump through whatever steps. I don't like it, not knowing what the pages look like.
Our only point with that is that then they're not going to really read the local, not get the story.
Well, isn't that what RL Now can be about? Ha ha ha. We could put out a press release, get RL Now to do a press
We can, but they're not going to tell the story of.
They need to read a sentence or two about what each one is about before they go to where you vote.
Because you know, we don't want people to fill out a survey. A lot of these names, while they're really great options, are names that probably most people are not going to be familiar with, to be honest. So it
Thanks for
sort of
that. I
misses.
appreciate that. So I'm just saying, what's the goal? If the goal is to fill out the survey, is to get people to complete
Well, right.
the
So
survey.
Thoughtfully
I appreciate that. So
the goal is we don't want people to fill out a survey on names they don't know, because then it's not going to be a conclusive survey.
Right.
Right.
I mean, our goal is it's to educate them.
Exactly.
It's not just to click the dots. It's also to educate them on our local history.
Right.
We recognize that we will be trading quantity for quality. We'll get many fewer responses.
That's probably true.
That's definitely true.
And I think that that's preferred.
I don't know about that.
Richard, is your concern that it's a separate page?
But why do we want people just throwing something up against the wall without any thought of it? I would rather have people who are thoughtful of it and think about it, rather than having somebody say, oh, I think equity is a good decision, and they haven't looked at what the other options are.
Right.
Part of the Arlington way is that it's about community engagement, and everybody's got to get, you fill out the survey. If the idea is to get people to fill out a survey, fill out the survey. If there's got to be a way of combining both where they can get to the survey kind of quickly.
Well,
without
we can make it quick. It may take 2 clicks. They don't have to read it, but at least they'll click to see that there's,
history there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a $9.97 internet deal where you have to scroll down 19 pages.
No.
I haven't seen it, so I couldn't tell you.
No, it's going to be, we just want to make sure that they see that there's explanations for everything before they just click on the names.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now, it is not going to be a long page.
And there was actually a helpful comment in the Q&A too, where someone suggested that you mentioned on the postcard the QR code takes them to the inscriptions in the survey and not just the survey. So they know that they're going to learn something and then vote.
And it's not like it's going to be like paragraphs on each person or name. It will be probably 2 to 3 sentences max.
But Richard, we hear you. We'll make it as easy as possible, but we do want people to think about it.
All right, so it sounds like the instructions for you, Ginger, is to add a sentence in there saying that the following names may be named street, boulevard, avenue, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next slide. Next steps, public polling takes place from October 23rd, which is Friday, to November 30th. The public will indicate their favorite names from the list of 20 that we just chose. Flyers will be in store, and postcards sent to homes will be sent to Arlingtonians and directing them to the LHA website. The webpage will include graphics of each names indicating who the name is and why the working group chose them. So we just talked about that a minute ago. So some advisory groups are going to be meeting in November: the neighborhood advisory group, the transportation advisory group, and the business advisory group. And they're going to do the same thing that Desiree and Maura did today, which is give us a report when we meet in December 2nd of what was discussed at the working group meeting, at the advisory group meeting, and what their takeaways were. So it's going to be very similar to what we had tonight.
Yeah.
And then, sorry.
Can you just circulate the names at the end of the meeting? That was in the chat.
Yeah. And then we'll continue to connect with Lehigh Highway schools and students to get their feedback as well. All right, and the next steps, our next meeting. So again, I mentioned before, it's December 2nd. We'll review the results of the public polling. We'll get advisory group reports. We'll narrow the list of 20 names to the top choice and 2 to 4 alternatives using ranked choice voting. And we'll indicate the reasoning behind the name choices. And if needed, we will finish this work on January 13th. So the homework to leave you with tonight, and thank you for sticking with us a little bit later than 8:30, is to encourage your community to fill out the public poll and continue to get the word out. Because even though, I think by having the descriptions there, we're going to get a lot of quality responses. We also want quantity. So get the word out and talk to your community, and we will get as much feedback, good feedback, as we can before December 2nd. And then most of you know how to reach us, but that is the contact info for Ginger and Maya.
Maya, can you just put the names up again? Just everybody wants to see them again. They went fast. And then send them out later.
Matthew, you had some fantastic representatives for some of the names tonight. Do you
Mhm.
want those people to send in their thoughts and reflections on some of the names since you're pulling together the explanation for the community? Or are
That's a
you
good-
putting that onus on on your team?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think we will reach out to the people who advocated for these names and ask them to help put some of their reasoning in writing so we can include that in the survey.
Yeah, I actually already emailed Maya and asked her if I could help her with a couple of the ones.
Great.
From the neighborhood. So just let me know.
Great. So that is a list of 20. One of those will be the name we recommend. So thank you for all the hard work tonight. We've gotten really far in a fairly short amount of time. So thank you for everything, and we'll reconvene on December 2nd.
And thank you,
Thank you.
Matt.
Thanks, everyone. Nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Everyone.